Hey listeners, welcome to the Coaches and Coffee Show, episode number 6. I'm your host, Ben Anderson.
And I'm Demetrius. In this episode, we discuss why different diets work and don't work. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah, man. So I guess you're drinking black coffee this morning, I guess.
I am, man. I am drinking some black coffee. No, I always drink black coffee though, so that's nothing new.
That's true, but you're not drinking a cortado like I am.
Oh, flexing on me again with the
flexing
cortado.
On you again. Did you end up getting yours from what is it again? Ironclad? Yeah.
Blanchard's.
Oh, you got a Blanchard's one recently?
I got a Blanchard's one, man. The Blanchard's blend.
Oh, my man. Love that Blanchard's.
It's good.
All right. Yeah. So what are we talking about today, man?
We're going over these diets, man. Talk about diets. I guess I set it off when I was talking about my intermittent fasting, which I'm fasting. I don't know. Is that a diet? Would you call fasting a diet? Intermittent fasting, I think, maybe falls under that.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of today, like framing it all in the reference of like people eating for goals or people eating for different ways for different reasons, we can kind of throw it in with the group there. Intermittent fasting and fasting in general can be classified as what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think really what we want to talk about is just like the reason why these different things work.
Mm-hmm.
For different people.
Yeah. So the diets that I'm hoping we can talk about today are the vegan vegetarian diet, or like a plant-based diet, paleo diet, Mediterranean diet, Whole30, though they're all kind of very similar, keto and carnivore, and then we can throw in a little bit of intermittent fasting in there as well.
Yeah.
And just kind of chat about like what people expect when they talk about these diets or why they do them or why they work for whatever reasons they work. For sure. And so what diet do you follow, Ben? It's a good question, man. I'm very flexible. So people would call it a flexitarian diet. But I eat generally more plant-based food, so I don't typically have a lot of meat or cheese and dairy in my diet. But again, I'm not so strict. So I'll have eggs occasionally. I'll occasionally have cheese, mostly on pizza. And then like very often, I wouldn't say very often, like maybe once a month, I'll have like a cheeseburger because that's a thing that I crave, just like, and when I go for it, I usually get a bacon cheeseburger. I don't like stop at cheeseburger.
Nice.
So it's like flexible, but I've done a mix of kind of all of them before, but for me, it always comes back to whole foods and focusing on that stuff and not trying to eat a lot of processed foods. So I can kind of justify all of my food choices as being as whole as possible, whether they're plant-based or whether they're animal products or whatnot. But that's mine. What about you? Besides not eating, when you do eat, what are you typically following?
Majority of the time I'm eating. So yeah, right now it's
let's hope so.
Majority of the time. But yeah, I would say, I guess, a flexitarian, if they want to call it that, or my diet typically consists of that of what you were speaking of, whole foods, trying to avoid food that are like overly processed. I mean, all food goes through some type of process, so minimally processed foods. But it's an array of things. So I mean, I am still eating meat, veggies, fish. I have it all, So there's nothing I truly. Donuts. Don't forget the donuts. That's in its own food group.
This
there.
Man loves his donuts.
Dude, I haven't been eating them like I have been. So, since quarantine, I think it's been like once in like a while if I happen to get one, but it hasn't happened much.
They'll be there when we come back.
Oh, I know. They'll
be there. That'll be one of the first things we do on our podcast when we get back is we'll get coffee and donuts.
Let's do that. I've been cleansing my palate for it, and then so I'm ready for it. That's why I'm taking this prolonged fast as well. This prolonged fast, like, man, I can't wait to enjoy a donut after this. It's going to be the best thing in the world.
Retitle it Donut Fast.
Donut Fast.
Getting ready for donuts.
That's it.
All right. So In your experience, what is the main reason that people typically try these diets, or why are they trying to change up and use one of these tools for their own reasons?
Um, in my experience, it could be from it usually starts with they have a goal in mind. They have something they want to change in their body, and then they think of these diets because either they heard of it through some type of media source, through friends and family, um, and that's typically what I think leads someone to be like, okay, let me try one of these diets, because also they look at the way they're eating and they see they connect it to where they're at, and they're like, oh well, what I'm doing right now obviously isn't working, so let me try something that seems to be working that they say in this article or that my friend has done, and try that, and maybe that'll work for me. So
Hmm.
I think it comes from a little bit like we tend to choose these diets. It can come from like a lack of knowledge sometimes of nutrition. Like we don't have those nutrition principles in mind, knowing that like whole foods, being in a caloric deficit, stuff like that is really what kind of leads to these changes. Um, so yeah, it's
Busting out the caloric deficit. I like it. Let's circle back to that in a minute, but
yeah.
I agree. I think a lot of people, they see it as one, like a means to an end, so they see it
Mm,
as a way to get to a goal that they're trying to achieve, or they're trying to feel better. Like they're
yeah.
feeling guilty, or they're feeling bad about their food choices, or they're just feeling like lack of energy. And so I think a lot of people, they turn to like a magic pill type idea with these diets. Like if I finally just like cut carbs out, or if I finally just stop eating dairy, or like whatever it is, they feel like they're all of a sudden they're going to feel better. But um, it doesn't typically work that way. A lot of these things can like show a quick return on results, but it's like you said, it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of being in a calorie deficit, especially depending on because
Depending
I
on the
think
goal.
like 90% of people are probably thinking about using one of these diets to achieve a weight loss or a fat loss goal.
Correct.
Yeah. So just to go over calorie deficit, that's when you're eating less calories than your body needs to maintain its current mass or its weight. And so we, as we looked up tons of research on this. We've dealt with this with so many clients in the past, but the only thing that dictates whether you lose weight or gain weight is your calories. And if you're in a calorie deficit, you will lose. And if you're in a surplus, you'll gain. And if you don't have any, you're not outside of your what we call maintenance, or what you need, then your body mass won't change. And so that rule applies, but there's so much nuance in all of these diets that makes it huge. And that's why some people, they have really great success on one but not on another, or whatnot. But yeah, maybe we can talk about why people have success on different diets, knowing that the only reason that they work is a calorie deficit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the first place to start is if they're having success on that diet, it's because it, first off, again, it hit the caloric deficit for them, but it was a way for they were able to get into that calorie deficit on that diet, and they were able to maintain that. So if that diet worked for them, and because they removed, if it was the low carb diet, they removed uh, carbs from their diet, which they probably ate majority of. So now they're in a deficit, so they lost weight. It wasn't essentially that carbs were the issue. It was again that they were not in the deficit beforehand. They probably could have adjusted what they were eating before to reach that deficit, or had a little bit more energy output, whatever it is, and that energy balance there. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, so that's
Yeah.
typically
If a
yeah,
if a typical American, I think, if my memory is correct, the typical American diet is somewhere around 55% carbs
correct.
and like 15 to 20% protein, and the rest made up of fat, which is somewhere around 30%. Um, and so if you take out 50% of your calories from carbohydrates, of course you'll fill in with the other ones, but odds are that you're not gonna achieve the same amount of calories as before. And so thus you'll create a calorie deficit, which is why low carb diets are so popular, because they're very easy to achieve a calorie deficit and see success. And not only that, they're easy to see that, that important momentum change like early on. And so when you cut out carbs, there's this in your body, when you ingest carbohydrates, they pair with water to break down. And so that holds weight, right? So water
Mm.
is weight in your body a lot. And so when you remove carbs as a source, you take away a lot of the water that's being stored with these carbohydrates, whether it's energy or just digestion. And so you'll see a rapid decrease in
Right.
weight pretty quickly. And so
Yeah.
people are like, wow, it's working really fast. And that might motivate people intrinsically to be like, I'm going to stick to this because it's actually working. And if you use that motivation in combination with like consistency and like keeping it sustainable, then you're gonna see that change of like weight loss or fat loss over time, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not that anything was crazy magic about removing carbs from your diet or that carbs are making you fat. It's that you manipulated your food in such a way that it created a positive environment for you to succeed in.
Yeah. You can put that on the opposite side as well. It works vice versa. Same thing with uh, the low fat diets. You know,
Or
reason why,
like the vegan or vegetarian diets, right?
like a vegan vegetarian diet, correct? Where you are focusing on a lot of carbs and a lot of you to get in a good amount of protein, you're going to have to get in a bit of carbs as well because of all those protein based stuff is going to be a combination of carbohydrates and protein on a vegan diet, especially. So
Right.
yeah, it works on both ends.
Yeah, and so yeah, just a fancy term is calorie density.
Mm.
If you have a primarily vegetarian, vegan, and plant based diet, it's hard to get a lot of calories in per like volume or like size of the food. So if we're talking about like a whole box of spinach, I'm talking like one of those. I think they're like, I don't know how many ounces, but they're the big ones,
Yeah,
if that whole thing, if you were to try to eat that whole thing, you would be full, but it's
for sure.
only going to end up being like 200 calories
Correct.
versus one tablespoon, like one little, like you little pour a little tablespoon in the pan for, like coating the oil in the pan. That's like 120 or more, and if you're liberal, like with it, you might get like closer to 200. So
Yeah,
you're looking at like the size of a box of spinach versus like the tiny little puddle of oil in the pan. And those are equated in calories, but they're much different in terms of how they feel in your body. So again, it's kind of manipulating how the calories are feeling to you and what kind of goal you're going for. So yeah.
for sure. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, outside, I mean, you already said it though. I mean, the reason why they work is either it's because you can adhere to it. You're removing a huge portion of percentage of calories that you're already eating, and you're getting into third, the most important thing, that caloric deficit. If your goal is weight loss, which majority of the time, again, like you said, if someone's going on for a diet, this is typically why, is to lose
Right.
weight.
Right. And, to touch on that with like paleo or whole 30 or Mediterranean diet, we kind of hit keto and carnivore. Like those are low carb, and carnivore is like that's just only meat. And so you're basically not taking in any veggies. I don't think they can have any vegetables. It's only meat.
Carnivore, yeah, I think it's excluding all vegetables.
That would make sense. That would
Yeah,
make sense. Um, so yeah, those ones in the middle where it's not so delineated as high carb, low carb. It's like kind of like it's still a standard mix. Those diets still rely, 100% on whole foods. So foods that you would find or you would have to cook or like something like that. And so they're not taking a lot of processed foods in. And so half of these diets are great when they study them because they usually compare them to like the average American diet, which is just full of like high calorie foods and highly processed foods.
yeah,
Which, side note, heard a great little podcast on stuff you should know, where they talked about the process these companies use to like get us to eat more of the processed foods. And it's probably true of all processed
mm.
foods, even like your protein, your health oriented like snack bars, all of it. They even talked about that, how you have this like flavor um, cap or like kind of level threshold where
Yeah,
you're like if you get so much of a flavor, you eventually say like, oh, I've had enough. And this guy was studying it, and he was like, we need to keep all the flavors like not at a right profile so that it never reaches that threshold, and so they never think they've had enough.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
flavor profile. I've heard about that. Yeah.
that blew my mind, man. That blew my mind. Because I mean, you talk about stuff like, oh, that's that junk food's like it's hard to put down, or it's just, but like literally, they're making it impossible to stop eating.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
No,
crazy.
definitely. And so yeah, going off of that, and like you're saying, like these diets they're researching and they're going off the average American, but they can work for some. And again, they are going off the average number. So you might not be the average person that it could work for. So don't be mad if a diet doesn't work for you. I guess we can go into that conversation there, because all these diets, again, they might benefit somebody because that person can stick to that thing. They already probably weren't eating that many carbohydrates, or they were, and they can adjust their lifestyle to that. But it may not work for you because you don't want to exclude carbs from your diet. That's not
Big
healthy
point.
for you. It's because, yeah, you do. The stress outweighs the benefit, to that. And so you might find yourself getting more stressed out, being more irritable, falling into what it's more like a binging pattern because you're restricting yourself so much from something that you truly want to have. And you can have it in moderation. You can still work that into your diet and still be in a caloric deficit. People do it all the time. We help our clients do that. So, yeah.
I think that's the most important thing, man, is uh, understanding that like if like say you have like 50 pounds you want to lose, right? And we know that if you're doing at a pretty good rate, you might lose like 4 to 5 a month. It might be a little less, it might be a little bit more, but like that's a pretty solid rate to lose that weight. So that's going to take what, 10 months or so to
Yeah.
lose 50 pounds like that. 10 months, if you have this diet where it's like you can't eat ice cream, and one of your favorite things to do is eat ice cream, and you have to do that for 10 months, like who's going to stick to that?
Yeah.
In 10 months you're going to have ice cream. And if you have a diet where you're like, if I have ice cream I've failed, then of course you're going to quit, and you're going to get discouraged, you're going to feel guilty and shameful, and you're going to stop. But if you don't like, if you understand these ideas of calorie deficit, it gives you all the freedom. It gives you all the freedom, because you're like, well, I can do a keto diet, and if I have a day where I have a little ice cream, it's not ruining my keto diet. It's like it's not in the rules of keto, but it's not going to break you. It's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess keto people would say you are ruining the keto diet. You're getting out of
Of course.
ketosis. Da, da. Yes,
Of course.
maybe in that form, but you're not ruining your progress that you can make towards
Right.
your goal. If your overall goal is to lose this weight, this 50 pounds here, and you're doing it via the ketogenic diet, and you're in a caloric deficit, having a night that you had some ice cream is not going to totally ruin your progress that you made. Yeah.
That's a great point, and I'm glad you drew the separation there between like talking about doing one of these diets to achieve your goal, and doing them to be on the diet. And so if you are trying to stay strict with keto, yeah, ice cream is going to ruin it. But if that's your goal, like then you're more aligned. If your goal
Yeah.
is to lose the weight and you're using the keto as a tool, then you have that flexibility. And that I think is key, especially when you're thinking about doing that for 10 months or even longer, right? Because like that 50 pounds in 10 months, that linearly makes sense, but that's going to be a hard journey that might not happen in 10 months. It might happen quicker, but it might take longer. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's a good point to draw that kind of delineation. That was good.
Definitely.
So yeah. So I guess you kind of tied it in already, but the philosophy about why these diets would work for some people and not for others. Maybe we can talk about that, like how some people see success on one versus another, or things like that.
Yeah, we definitely can get deeper into that. And I think, I kind of mentioned some of the stuff there, but there's a there's there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, outside of kind of talking about the preferences, your food preferences and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. Where would you take it from there? Because I kind of mentioned, talking about food preferences, how they can stick to it, not stick to it.
Yeah, I just think, I think it all comes back to restrictiveness as the
Mm,
underlying thing, which both of those things encompass. But um, if you feel that your eating pattern or your diet or your plan is restrictive in that you can't sustain it, you can't enjoy the things you want to enjoy or live the way you want to live on the diet, then you're not going to do it for very long. And in my opinion, I also believe in your opinion that this isn't about finding a way to eat for 10 months.
mm,
It's about finding a way to eat for the rest of your life.
correct.
That's gonna help you, manage and solve some of the problems that you're having, or just get you to live the life you want to live. So
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish with yours.
Oh yeah, so I was gonna say, so using one of these tools is a great option, and you can learn a lot along the way as far as yourself of like what's sustainable for me and what's going to help me, and what sorts of things I don't like doing and do like doing and that sort of stuff. And I think if you combine that and those use of these tools with that knowledge of like the underlying truth of all this, you can find your own way with that stuff, which is exactly what you and I have done. Is we've
Yeah,
found our own ways of eating that sustain what we're trying to do and the way we want to live our lives. And like they don't really have a label. Like they're flexible because that's what it is. That's essentially where you want to get to, is you want to have a diet that you can mix and match and do what you want with in these underlying principles.
for sure. Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it because none of these diets are inherently bad. We've seen that's why they're coming out. That's why they have studies and they can show that they do work, and that's why it has worked for people. But I think it's more beneficial if you can look at it and say, okay, why did it work? Does it work for me for the long term? Like you said, is it
Mhm.
something too restrictive that I can't continue to do and sustain? And if it can, taking just those notes from it and being okay, how can I implement this going forward in my life? And I think having a good nutritional foundation is a very important part, especially if you're going into diets. Diets can sometimes motivate you and get you into thinking more because what they do, most of these diets, their thing is getting whole foods in, getting in minimally processed foods. They're not talking about eat all the junk you want, unless if you're thinking of like if it fits your macros type of thing there, which
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know if that's a diet. I don't know what to call that, but um, most diets that the ones that we're speaking of at least, they're telling you that no, focus on whole foods, get in like nutritious foods, get in
Mhm.
nutritionally dense foods, stuff like that. It's their main focus, which you can start to identify and bring that into your your wheelhouse, so those are things you need to be focusing on.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, that's really important. Um, yeah. If it fits your macros, that's interesting, isn't it? Um, It's kind of a good principle to talk about, though. We could kind of throw it in there, but this is
Yeah,
very detailed. It's like it comes out of bodybuilding, right? And people, when they're counting macros, they're not just using calories as their guide. They're using like overall macronutrients as their guide. So carbs, proteins, and fats. And I think alcohol is technically considered a macronutrient, but
yeah,
um, those three things, and they're splitting them up in such a way that's like optimizing fat loss and maximizing muscle gain. Um, and so they're essentially counting these macros and say, at the end of the day, you have like 100 grams of carbs left because you've eaten on point with like your protein, your fats, and you've had like just a few carbs, but you haven't really gone overboard. Like they'll be like, you can have two Pop Tarts because it'll be 100 grams of carbs or whatever it is,
yeah,
right? And so that whole concept, it is a very strict way of approaching a diet, but it also has that freedom, which is why people like it so much.
yep,
But it's that same underlying concept of like whole foods first, and then if there's extra room, like wiggle in some Pop Tarts and some ice cream and whatnot. So yeah.
yeah.
Um, Yeah. So I was gonna talk about the like the protein idea. So there's lots of research out there talking about how much protein you should get in your diet and what's optimal. But how much of a role do you think that plays in these diets, and what's the purpose of protein, or what's the benefit of protein in your diet?
Oh man, it plays a huge role. I think outside of um, the keto diet, I mean, keto takes a relatively like average approach to protein. They're probably on like the lower end of like the zero point 0.6 to a pound per body weight,
Gram
um,
per body weight. Yep.
gram per body weight. But it's still an important factor in all these diets because of what it does to help you retain your muscle during a caloric deficit. Making sure you're retaining your muscle, it keeps you satiated because it is because of the source that it gets. You definitely are going to be more. You're going to feel fuller
Mm-hmm.
having higher protein in your diets there. I mean, and if you want to
Mm-hmm.
get to like the down to like the energy level, the caloric level, I mean, it does it causes you, it does have a higher thermic effect on your body.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can you'll burn it, you burn more energy eating a higher protein diet.
Right. For people who don't
Digesting
know,
it, yeah,
while you're digesting protein, it takes more calories to digest than other foods like carbs and fats.
correct.
And so you're basically getting down into the really nitty gritty of how many calories you're burning by trying to use your digestive system to burn some extra calories for you, which is that's a thing. I mean, it happens in the margins,
Yeah.
and so that's an important thing. So I think you hit on the big ones like staying satiated, feeling fuller longer with a lot of protein, making sure you're not losing muscle mass. Which this is probably the biggest one for people going through fat loss or weight loss is if you want to like have room in your diet for like more calories, you want to keep muscle mass around. And that's the reason why weightlifting and just strength training in general, in combination with a calorie deficit, is like like the best way to go about the whole process, is because you retain the muscle mass, and especially if you get your enough of your protein in, you'll do a better job of maintaining the muscle mass and staying full through your calorie deficit, which can get hard. But at the end of it, you come out with more muscle mass than you would have if you take a different approach. And so if you just took
Mm.
your body size and whittled it down, but your percentages of muscle mass to fat-free mass or fat mass didn't
Fat mass.
change,
Yeah.
yeah, then you would kind of have a similar setup than as you did before.
Yeah.
Did I explain that well? Do you want to like elaborate on that? I feel like I kind of muddled it at the end.
No. I mean, other than, I mean, no, you said it right. If you're able to retain that muscle mass and you're losing fat, yes, your muscle compared to your fat mass is your body fat percentage is going to go down. So yeah, no,
Mhm.
I think you explained it really well.
Yeah, and maybe what people might not realize is how much more energy is demanded by muscle mass than it is fat mass, and it's a huge difference, and that's why I always use this example of like Dwayne Johnson or like Michael Phelps, those guys who do a lot of they're muscular and they do a lot of work in like lifting or like athletics, swimming, whatever it is. But those guys, they need a lot of energy to maintain what their body has. And so when you hear about The Rock eating like what are these 5,000 or 9,000, whatever the thousands of
Maybe
calories,
10,000. I don't know. Some crazy
it's
number.
probably been up there before for sure. Yeah. But like when people, they hear like, oh, I got to eat 1,500 calories for like my fat loss, but Dwayne Johnson's eating 5,000 calories. Well, it's because he has a lot of muscle mass, and you don't have to get to that point, right?
No.
We don't need
Yeah.
to all look like The Rock, but there's that principle of like, if you have more muscle mass, you have more food to eat. And nobody wants to eat like 1,200 calories or 1,500 calories for the rest of their life. That's not easy. That's not super fun. And we like food, and we should like food. And
Yeah.
so, if your goal is to have a little more freedom with your food, you need to keep muscle mass around.
For sure. For sure. And again, the 1,200. There might be somebody who is 5'4'8" or something like that, and 1,200 is maybe an average number, within that range there, 12 to 17. But for somebody who is at average height and who wants to have, again, some muscle mass, and yeah, you definitely want to enjoy more calories than that for sure.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, man. All right. I feel like we hit a lot of stuff there. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about with
Um,
this?
yeah, I think we hit all the notes here. I think so. Yeah, I think the thing is that the main thing is all these diets can work if they fit your eating style and your eating habits, and you can maintain it and sustain it over a long period of time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Go in. I think you always want to go in with with the not with the end goal in mind, but does it look like after? Once you
Mm.
hit your goal, are you going to maintain this diet, or are you going to try to go back to a way of eating that you prefer, that you can include some of the foods that you did enjoy before the diet? Know that, so when you get to the end, you're just not like, okay, I hit my goal, diet's over, boom, back to what I was doing before, and then 6 months to a year later, you're like, oh crap, like I have to go back on that diet again. Like,
Throwback. They'll come and see you and they'll be like, I tried keto diet and it worked for me. And then you'll be like, did it work?
throwback question. Yep. Back to
Yeah.
our last podcast.
Mm.
But yeah, so to avoid that yo-yo dieting, to avoid going back and forth in and out of diets, know what you're trying to get out of it, understand that. And I think before even you try diet, sometimes the diet is the way to get you into better eating habits. That's totally fine. But before that, maybe just try to focus on the points that really work with these diets. Try to get yourself in a caloric deficit. Find out what your energy balance is,
Mm.
and keep track of that stuff and see how that works with the current foods that you're eating. Try to include more whole foods and veggies into your diet. Um, be a little bit more mindful with your food. Just take time in eating your food, filling out your fullness levels and stuff like that. Really, just try to yeah, get outside of just your typical eating patterns that you fell in, and really say, okay, like, am I actually hungry at this point? Ask yourself those questions. Take time and try that out first, and then once you get a good basis of this, maybe then going into a diet, knowing that, okay, I've tried actually counting my calories, or at least being mindful of how much food I'm in and portioning out foods, but it maybe hasn't worked well for me, or now I want to try one of these diets. Then you can go into that diet. But I think having
Mm.
a better foundation, I think that's what's been helpful for, I know myself, because I've tried multiple of these diets, and I feel like I can always come out of it a little bit better because I have a good foundation and I understand why these diets work and what works for me. And I think if you can do that, you can see the benefits of the diet, but then also after the diet's over, or after you've done the diet and stuff like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's big. I know we've talked about before how we've tracked calories, intermittently throughout our lives or whatever. But every time that you track calories and you have to input every little stupid thing you eat, you learn and you gather information about your food. Um, and while a lot of people have this negative relationship with counting calories, and that's mostly because it might be my fitness pal's, fault, but it's essentially somebody's told you eat as little calories as you can, and it's giving you that goal, and when you don't hit that goal, you feel guilty, right? So you don't have that flexibility, you don't have that understanding of like, well, if I eat 1,500 calories, I might do a little better, sustain it longer. So outside of those principles, um, like counting calories, you get all that information, you start to learn, and you see food a little differently, and it's not so robotic as like, oh, I see chicken breast and I see 65 grams of protein. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be like, I understand what I need out of my food, and like I kind of can group it, in my day, and I understand it a little bit better. So it's not like we're just like seeing numbers on our screens as we're like cooking eggs in the morning, but
No,
but
yeah, you're totally right.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
it does help. I mean, it yeah, depending on your history with food, it might not be the best approach for you.
Mhm.
But if you can get to a point when you are ready, doing it just for just a small amount of time, it doesn't, for a short amount of time. It doesn't have to be an extended period of time. It doesn't mean you have to track for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you have to track for an entire year. I mean, shoot, not even 6 months. I mean, a good solid like 90 days, because you probably are not eating that different week to week. So within that period of time, if not less than that, you can get a lot of good information and start to understand. I know that's what helps. Yeah, that's what helps us. Is like, yeah, we don't see numbers when we're portioning out food now if we're not tracking, but you built up this habit, so you're very mindful and you can identify around an average, an estimate of what you're eating because you've gone through the process of really like chunking down and be like, okay, I know usually this amount of protein is, I'll get this amount of protein from this size portion of meat or whatever it is that you're eating.
Yep. Yeah, and like we see it on a daily basis. It does not every day needs to be 100%.
No,
like
not at all.
the overall, week by week, month by month, that's where you need to be kind of on point. And so like if you have a day where you didn't eat great on protein, okay, do better the next day. It's like it's not the end of the world if you don't nail one day or you don't nail 2 days in a row, whatever. Like you're trying to get that habit long term and sustainable, and so you don't have to sweat those little things anymore.
Yeah,
man. Yeah.
I think, like you said, given that outlook there, always look at the bigger picture. You've been really good at mentioning that in our podcast. Just letting people know, like, it's a bigger picture. Like, just don't look at the day to day.
Yeah, expand the frame. Yeah. If you can look at things on year by year basis, like that's more of where you want to be at, because that's going to feel sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure, definitely.
Yeah, man. So we established that we don't just see numbers when we cook.
That would be kind of cool.
We covered that. It would be kind of cool, but I'm like totally picturing like Good Will Hunting / what's that Russell Crowe movie where he's really good at
that's what came to my mind actually when you said that. Oh my gosh, the name of the movie is at the top. Oh, that's gonna mess with me.
Yeah. Whoops. Somebody will leave it in the comments, right? No, that's not it.
That's not it.
But that's Dustin Hoffman. That is another movie where he's really good with numbers. But I think Russell Crowe. Oh man, I should definitely know this one.
Dude, this is bad. I'm kind of mad right now. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's all right. Somebody will save us in the comments, right, guys?
It's too late. They can't save us.
True. Oh man. All right. So I think we should wrap it up there.
For sure, man. I think we gave a lot of good information. If there's something that you want to know, if you want us to go more in depth with like each of these diets, please let us know. I know we mentioned in the beginning a little bit about like intermittent fasting and stuff like that. I guess we can also have a different conversation on different tools that you can use throughout your eating range. But yeah, I think this is a good place to stop it there.
Right on. Yeah, I think I'll definitely attach the like a metabolic calculator, like some way you can find your BMR and your basic, like your needs for calories within anywhere I post this. I'll try to post it with the Spotify or the podcast links and everything. But that's a good place to start with the one that we share. You can start there and find your calories based on how often you're exercising and how active a lifestyle you lead. And you can start there and kind of reduce calories to create that calorie deficit. And again, be conservative, be minimal with your reduction. Don't go crazy with it.
Yep.